Actual control remains very tense. In fact, remember, the first intrusion was attempted on the night of 29/30th. Now we've had reports of a second one that was attempted on Monday night. Both have been repelled, and the Indian forces are now aggressively retaliating in some parts, is what India today has learned. But what exactly is the situation on the ground, and why is the area south of Pangong Tso Lake in eastern Ladakh now turning out to be so critical for both the armies? Remember, in a sense, they are in an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation of a kind that we haven't seen in several decades. This is clearly no ordinary border intrusion. What exactly is happening on the ground? It's our top story tonight.
The line of actual control is on the boil. Tension is rising, but this time it's China that's on the back foot. India has the Chinese on the defensive after preemptive action following intelligence reports and inputs about Beijing planning another intrusion. The army mobilized the Special Operations Unit to join Jawans of the Sikh Light Infantry and elite troops of the Vikas Regiment who were already deployed near the southern bank of the Pangong Tso. Anti-tank guided missiles have also now been positioned to neutralize any Chinese armor advance. On the night intervening August 29 and 30, about 200 PLA troops tried to occupy the strategic heights of Kala Top. This would have given the Chinese an upper hand in confrontation even on the south bank of Pangong Tso. But the Chinese were unaware that Indian troops were lying in wait. Challenged by the Indian army, the Chinese troops beat a hasty retreat. In another swift maneuver, Indian troops then occupied the dominating features.
The Chinese provocative military movements were preempted by the Indian army by occupying certain heights and preventing the PLA from establishing a foothold on the southern bank of Pangong Tso, which has led now to the Chinese allegations against the Indian armed forces that they have transgressed the LAC.
Blacktop is one of the most important peaks in this area because from here, the entire Pangong Tso region can be monitored. After reclaiming Blacktop, Indian troops removed the Chinese surveillance cameras and equipment installed here by the Chinese.
With the Indian army dominating crucial mountains in the southern bank of the Pangong Lake, it is believed that India will be in a better position to negotiate with the Chinese because controlling heights is extremely important when it comes to tactics. Also, in New Delhi, there have been a series of meetings in the security establishment to decide what the future course of action is going to be and particularly how to negotiate with a stubborn Chinese PLA from here onwards. With Manjeet Negi and camera person Hitesh Abhishek Bhalla in New Delhi for India Today.
Let's raise the big questions then today. Are India and China inching towards a situation like 1962, a war-like situation? What happened exactly in Pangong Tso, and why is China torpedoing any efforts at disengagement? I'm joined by three very special guests. Ajay Shukla, Defense and Strategic Affairs Analyst, who's been tracking this relentlessly for the last few months. I'm joined by Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, who's been former Chief of Staff at the 14th Corps, and I'm joined by Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of the country. Appreciate all of you joining us. Let me come to you, Ajay, first, because you have been tracking what's been happening on the ground. Are we seeing a further escalation of the situation? It happened in June when there was an actual conflict which resulted in casualties. This time it appears that the Indians are also striking back. Give us a sense of what you're learning from your sources on the ground, Ajay.
Rajdeep, it seems to be increasingly clear that the Chinese have a clear game plan to engage the Indians in talks, to have talks at the military-to-military level, to engage in talks at the diplomatic level, but to continue doing what they're doing on the ground, which is to expand their hold of tactically important features so that they can define a new line of actual control where they hold all the tactical high cards. It began in Galwan, it extended then to the Pangong area, and now it's moving south from Pangong to the south bank of the Pangong and towards Chushul. I would say that nobody should be surprised, and I'm sure the Indian Army is fully expecting this, that they would then take the action points to Dumti and to Demchok, which are further south, and then at the end of it have a new line of actual control where they hold all the tactically dominating features, where the Indians are perpetually at a disadvantage, and towards this end they're going through the pretense of talks and of dialogue. So I'm sure the Indians are aware of this. I'm sure that they're taking care of this, but that seems to be the situation as of now.
But I just want to add on to that, Ajay. I read a tweet of yours this morning which says, patience is running out on the Indian Army, which believes China is tying it down in fruitless dialogue while continuing its aggression on the ground. India is concerned that the PLA really wants to focus on changing the LAC in Depsang while diverting Indian attention towards Pangong. You seem to suggest that the Indian Army now believes that patience is running out. There have been reports that we have also struck back in a few areas, especially in Chushul. So is this now very much quid pro quo, both sides targeting each other?
You're absolutely correct, Rajdeep. What you're seeing is an inflection point. You're seeing the beginnings of the Indian Army starting to retaliate now against Chinese incursions and intrusions. So far, it's just been a sort of a more modest response, partly because the Indian troop buildup had not taken place so far. But now the Indian troops are in place. I think that if the Chinese continue trying to expand their hold and their threshold and their control over more important features, you're going to see more vigorous Indian retaliation from now on. I think that the young officers on the ground who are very aggressive, who are very good soldiers, they don't like the idea of being tied up in dialogue while the Chinese troops continue to expand their hold. So that's what I was referring to when I tweeted that. The Indian Army soldiers on the ground and the young officers on the ground are itching for action.
You know, that's the worry, General Kulkarni, because there was a sense that perhaps after what happened in June, both sides were trying to reach out to each other, possibly a disengagement, but obviously there is no disengagement. Do you fear this situation now could escalate out of control, not just in eastern Ladakh, but in other sectors as well, where we are told there are potential eyeball-to-eyeball confrontations now?
Rajdeep, I would put it, to some extent, I do agree with Ajay on some issues. He's right. There is no doubt in my mind that the Chinese are trying to probe how much prepared is the Indian Army. And this probing action is going on. The Chinese are fully prepared. They've been there for the last about now almost 6 months on the Tibetan plateau with all the work that they need to. They know what is to be done. But they're trying to probe. They probably are thinking that India is still in the mold of 62. They might be just saying something and not be able to deliver. But what happened at Galwan is the turning point. They realized it at Galwan that it happened all too sudden. It wasn't actually, it was premeditated from the Chinese side. They probably would have thought, but they did not expect that kind of a reaction, which came so violently from the Indian troops that the Chinese were just taken aback. And after that, they're busy probing. Now you try and see the action that the Chinese are trying to do, a provocative military action on the southern side of Pangong Tso Lake. What is it indicative? The Chinese are wanting to establish a foothold on the southern bank. The moment this foothold is established on the southern bank of Pangong Tso, the game changes, because then they have a free run. And that run, they thought they could be able to do it. The very fact that the tactical ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance,
the fact is, So the fact is the Chinese are not holding back. General Kulkarni, the fact is, despite your claim that Galwan was an inflection point, the Chinese are not holding back. They are continuing with their aggression. I'm just getting in more breaking news. Indian security forces have today foiled an attempt by the Chinese army to transgress into Indian areas in the general area of Chumar. Around 7 to 8 heavy vehicles of the Chinese army set off towards the Indian side of the line of actual control from their camp. Sources are telling Aaj Tak and India Today, in Depsang area also as part of the Chinese buildup, their troops fired illuminating shots in the air after dark yesterday, after which tension has increased. The point is, the fact is, whatever our retaliation, the Chinese are not stepping back. They are not disengaging. That's the concern, isn't it, somewhere, General Kulkarni, that the Chinese seem to be here to stay.
Yeah, Rajdeep, you're right. The Chinese are inching for confrontation. They're inching for confrontation. They are provoking the Indians to see. They're gauging where could they be weak. Let me tell you, a defeat or even a draw by the Chinese is a total defeat for them. They know at this point of time, if the Indian army is so strong, they will not inch. They would rather wait. Wait and watch, even if it 1 winter, 2 winter, 3 winter. The Chinese, the way I look at it, are inching for confrontation. They're wanting India to toe their line. They're wanting the LAC, which they perceive to be accepted by India. Indians are not going to accept it. If that be so, then it's absolutely clear. What are the Chinese there for? The Chinese are there to probe, to see, can they win? When they know they cannot win, they will not confront. They will only do coercion. And that is what it will end to. Coercion as much as they can. The strategic alliances also will prevent confrontation. But the Chinese coercion, pinpricking will continue till they feel...
Okay, so you're calling it pinpricks. I'll come back to that in a moment. But Kanwal Sibal, where does this leave Indian diplomacy? There was so much talk of investment in dialogue at the highest level. Prime Minister Modi, President Xi, Mamallapuram, Ahmedabad, that's all been forgotten. At the moment, you have a serious potential military confrontation. Do you believe it is now possible to invest in reaching out to China diplomatically? I know that Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar, along with his Chinese counterpart, are at the SEO summit in Russia. Is there possibilities at all of any diplomatic engagement, or have matters now slowly getting out of control?
Well, you know, there was nothing wrong in this government or previous governments trying to engage China and work out some modalities of being able to cohabit, even when there are serious differences which, to my mind, are not going to be resolved in the foreseeable future. And the Chinese have been saying that openly. All their policies that we see directed at India are strategically very adversarial, and they have not relented. So their political and diplomatic position, as we have seen with regard to India, whether it is the NSG or the UN Security Council, or raising the Kashmir issue in the UN Security Council, or their neighborhood policy, the CPEC, BRI, whatever it is, maritime maritime pressure on India, the Silk Road. So all these are clear signs that China wants hegemony, wants to dominate Asia, and wants India to accept China's superiority and its #1 position in Asia, which for them is the stepping point then to really begin their wider confrontation with the United States of America. But since they're on the border and we have a problem there, it's a very strong country. It's the second largest economy, the biggest exporter in the world, with economic tentacles everywhere. We have to engage them, and we've been engaging them. But China has now, to my mind, started pursuing policies which have actually started to begin to destroy their international understanding. It is the beginning of the collapse of Xi's foreign policy as he had thought he would pursue in terms of achieving his dream. So China actually has committed a very grave mistake in confronting India in Ladakh, even when they are embroiled with the United States in South China Sea and the ASEAN countries and Japan and others. So they can't fight on two fronts. We talk about our problem on two fronts. China has a bigger problem on two fronts because they are the strongest military power in the world, which is confronting them in the East. So there is a limit beyond which China simply cannot go. And if they continue this confrontation, if they don't reach an agreement with India, their international position will become even weaker as time goes on.
Right.
So it's a loss-loss situation for them. Yes, it is a problem for us. It imposes a lot of burden on us. It makes us, it confronts us with difficult choices.
You're saying it's a loss for the Chinese.
Them, but China is going to be a bigger loser in this.
Okay, you're saying China is going to be the big loser if they escalate the conflict further. But I just want to take a pause on this because we've got a story which shows just exactly the kind of military buildup that's taking place on both sides. This is perhaps the biggest military buildup since the 1960s. So you are now in a very, very serious potential military confrontation-like situation with both sides showing aggressive intent. Take a look at what exactly is happening now on the border in terms of the military buildup. Here's a story.
Battle tanks within range of each other, artillery gun positions, Chinese Type 15 tanks, and Indian T-90 tanks. The south bank of the Pangong Lake is on the boil like never before since the 1962 war. That's right, the latest flashpoint is across the Pangong Lake's Fingers area on the southern side. And it is here that a unit of the Indian Special Frontier Force mounted a preemptive action on Saturday night, occupying crucial heights and catching the advancing Chinese totally off guard. Chinese Type 15 tanks now sit near the base of the mountains, with the Indian forces staring down at them. But the Chinese tanks are not the only armored strength in this sector. Let's now zoom out to give you a bird's eye view. This is where things now stand. The red arrow points to the heights taken over by India at the line of actual control, including Kala Top. But just a few hundred meters downhill are Chinese tanks, armed and ready, but totally at a disadvantage because they are lower down. India today has learned that the Indian units at the heights are armed with anti-tank weaponry like the Spike system designed to kill tanks at range, a formidable weapon procured recently. But the Indian warriors on the mountain also have tank support in the sector. To the bottom left, near the Spangur Gap, is a full regiment of Indian T-90 tanks, deployed in advance precisely to preempt Chinese aggressions in this sector. These tanks are heavier and less agile than the Chinese Type 15 tanks, but the flat land of the Chushul sector makes this perfect terrain for such combat vehicles. This is the first time that Chinese Type 15 and Indian T-90 tanks have been positioned so close to each other, completely within range and on terrain where both can be very effective. Also note, deeper into the Chinese side is a gun position that emerged late in June and became a prominent act of belligerence by China even as talks were on between both sides. India has gun positions in the Chushul sector too. Since the Galwan bloodshed of June 15, this is the first truly aggressive face-off between the two sides, with India not only speaking from a position of strength but also calling for a de-escalation. India Today will continue to bring you the latest of a rapidly evolving story. With Manjeet Negi and Shiv Arur in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Ajay Shukla, when you see the kind of build-up on both sides, give us a sense into our viewers in terms of war gaming. Are we at a huge disadvantage vis-a-vis the Chinese, or would you say that we are now much better prepared after being caught perhaps napping in March, April, May when the Chinese made these advances, that we are now in a better position to strike back as we seem to be in the last 48 hours?
Yeah, that's a realistic assessment, Rajdeep. We were taken by surprise when the intelligence sort of misassessments took place towards the end of April. The Chinese were largely unopposed when they entered Indian territory in the beginning and middle of May. But then the Indian build-up started. And now there is an approximately even build-up on both sides. If the Chinese do attempt to sort of occupy more territory, as we saw yesterday, day before yesterday, they are going to be opposed, they are going to be blocked. And to that extent, there's an evenness in the sort of deployment right now. But remember, this is just in Ladakh. The Chinese do have the option to open other fronts as well. The Chinese military has the sort of the flexibility, the communications grid, the logistics network to open fronts in other sectors as well. And India will have to be prepared for that. We cannot just believe that the confrontation will be confined to Ladakh, and if we continue to hold the Chinese there, we've achieved our aim. It will be a much wider confrontation. The Chinese have been planning for this for a long time, and the Indians will have to bargain for a much broader engagement with the Chinese now.
So when General Kulkarni says these are pinpricks, you don't agree? Are these pinpricks, or are these part of a wider strategy to gain strategic advantage?
Rajdeep, the Chinese have come with a certain strategic aim in mind. The frontage, can you hear me, Rajdeep?
Mm-hmm.
The frontage on which they have come, the sort of frontage on which they have come, the force levels with which they have come, the aggression with which they have come, means that this is not just pinpricks. This is a clear, concerted, strategic plan that the Chinese have. It's rooted in larger political goal, which could be both domestic within China as well as external and strategic. So the Chinese, I mean, we absolutely cannot dismiss what is happening as a pinprick. This is not a pinprick. These are clearly concerted plans and which are being implemented on the ground. We need to take them with all due seriousness.
General Kulkarni, you want to respond? These are much more than just pinpricks. This is possibly China's biggest attempt since the 1960s to expand its influence and gain territory across Ladakh in particular, and who knows, as Ajay says, possibly in other sectors as well.
Rajdeep, when I'm talking about pinpricks, he's trying to probe. That's the word. He's trying to probe to see where and how does India react across the front. I'd say 3,400 and 3,800 kilometers along. He would try. Wherever he wants to see, he will try. That is why he has gathered. Again, if you look back in 1979, he gathered 2 lakh troops, almost 20 divisions opposing Vietnam. And when Vietnam was unprepared for, he assaulted. It is that he knows. And despite that, what did the Chinese get? A bad name. They did not do anything. Who won? The Vietnamese won ultimately with the kind of image they had, even after having lost to Americans, the French, and everyone over there. So in this context, when I said they're trying to probe, they have come, of course, with intention. Who would want to have so many divisions across unless they have a reason for it? And they're trying to. But they will not succeed. They thought that at a point of time that they could coerce India. Okay. This coercion pressure will continue from their side. And that is what they're looking at it. What are Chinese wanting? Chinese believe that they're the center of the universe. China cannot accept defeat. And now when they're seeing what has happened in South Pangong Tso, they've realized, well, they were almost at the verge of defeat. The Chinese troops and the Indian troops were heading for that ridge line. And who won? The Indians got there fastest. And that is also giving them a feeling that it is not the right time now to do it. If they feel that it is the right time, they'll definitely do confrontation. But when they know that this is not the time, they're trying to probe everywhere. All across. They're probing in Arunachal Pradesh, they'll probe in Lipu Lake, they'll try and probe in Central Sector, they'll try and probe in Sikkim, they'll try and probe in Eastern Ladakh. They'll probe. Right. But if they find that they've been confronted very badly from the Indian side, and they're getting it back, and the Chinese must get it back. Chinese only understand one language, that once they get it back, they know it is strength on the other side. You will find the Chinese retreating.
Very quickly, Kamal Sibal, I just have 30 seconds. Want to get a sense from you. Are you telling me now that therefore the diplomatic options should be closed? That whatever has to be done now at the military level, and any disengagement also will have to be taken at the level of the commanders? This is out of the political and diplomatic sphere of influence?
See, two things. One is that when we talk about the strategic aspect of what is happening, it is not only military, it is political, diplomatic, economic. So whatever small gains that they may make on the military side, they will lose enormously on the political, diplomatic and economic side. So they have to make their calculations as to whether it's worth it. Secondly, even if in the worst case scenario, they manage to change the line of control somewhat to their advantage in terms of occupying tactical heights, the damage that this will do almost permanently to India-China relationship will be very severe and at China's cost. Because everybody all across the world will continue to cite this as China's aggression, China's hubris, China's expansionism. Already this language is being spoken, and everybody is going to become suspicious, barring Pakistan maybe. And therefore, the loss to them in terms of what they seek to achieve on the international plane will be very severe. So I think China has made a serious mistake. They're not going to gain from this. And insofar as the bilateral relationship is concerned, I think it will never be the same as it has been before in terms of trying to engage China and find some modus vivendi. Now there will be an undercurrent of almost permanent adversarial confrontation of sorts, where India will have to make certain choices in terms of it's China in terms of security with other partners, whether it is Quad or Indo-Pacific or Vietnam or Indonesia or whatever. Strengthening our Navy in particular, our Air Force.
That's for the future. That's for the future, Mr. Sibal. That's for the future. For now, the fact is the situation remains hugely tense along the border, with the distinct fear of it escalating. That is really why this is our big story this evening. The standoff on the border is spiraling out of control.